I don't know if it's still in print. I don't know. Okay, so let's go over. Okay, so we've outlined the problem about how without proper address, a person doesn't have a right to contravene the Torah's system of assigning heirs. So how can a person assign different heirs? How can a person give money to charity from his trust, from his estate? So Os Beis, he says, Va'afal gavda b'shulchan aruch sham b'simiration and Beis Beis kaimelan demitzvah l'kaim divrei hameis. Oh, so we started seeing this yesterday. He says, yes, you could argue that it's a mitzvah to fulfill the will of the decedent. He says that'll work out when the heirs are adults. He says, but what about when the heirs are minors? He says, we don't say that the minor has a mitzvah to fulfill the wish of the decedent. Okay, I'm just going through. Okay, so Gimel. V'hinei b'Mordechai b'Bava Basra Os Tafkuf Tzadi Aleph Kosev b'Shem Haram Sha'af Adam Bari Shemitzaveh Ofan Chiluk Nechasav La'achar Mita. He says the Mordechai does write in the name of the Rambam that if a person is healthy and he gives instructions about how he would like his estate to be divided, Ein Tzarech Shum Kinyan V'Chal B'Dibur Piv L'Chud. The Mordechai is of the opinion that all you need to do is just say what your wishes are as far as the division of your estate after you die, and then that in itself is effective. Mishpat Imrei. He says, and that's actually brought by the Beis Yosef. He says, according to that opinion, any will that you write today, even a secular, it's done secularly, would actually create an immediate granting of that estate to whoever you leave in your will. However, the Beis Yosef says that all of the other authorities disagree with the Mordechai. Dirak b'shchiv meira hamutal al eres davai tiknu chachamim shedvarav yiyu kiketuvim ubechim esurim. He says all the other authorities, says the Beis Yosef, explain that a person must be on his deathbed, and only instructions on your deathbed will actually work by just verbal or written instruction. And the rabbis made a special accommodation for a person on his deathbed because they didn't want to get mature. In other words, normally, when you want to create a transaction of property, that the property changes possession from A to B, you have to do an actual kinyan, right? And that kinyan takes place, and without any other stipulation, the transfer is made right away. Kinyan chalipin, kinyan meshicha, kinyan hagba, all different types of kinyanim, but it has to be a kinyan. Writing something down on a piece of paper does not affect a kinyan. Furthermore, the only time that it does is with someone who's called a shchiv meira. He's literally on his deathbed. He knows that he's going to pass away imminently. And the rabbis therefore said that for such a person, they made an exception. And they said that his verbal instruction creates a transaction. Why did they do that? It's a special provision. They did it because they were worried that if we don't, he might be upset that he wants certain things to happen. He's too weak to create an actual kinyan. And if we don't allow his verbal or written instructions to hold, that may cause him so much distress is that he'll die early. Okay? Kishelo yehi muftach sheyiskayim l'davar, v'val bari la'olam tzarech kinyan, afilu b'mitzav lahedjim achmas misa. But if a person is completely healthy and he wants certain things to happen before he dies or upon his death, just verbal instruction is not enough, according to the vast majority of poskim. Okay, v'lichaora haya efshar lomar be'ikar din zeh, the whole v'kaimelon b'shulchan aruch sham b'simin shin samach tesiv vav v'od mekamos dedina de malchus adina. He says one might be able to argue another argument, which is dina de malchus adina. The law of the land is the law. And we know that we've applied that to various different issues when we were learning Imrei Yaakov. Like, for example, what is considered a legal transaction? Well, sometimes if the Dina de Malchusa says that a transaction is a legal transaction, even though according to halacha it may not be, but you have to abide by the law of the land. Right? Uve'inyanenu harei hatzava'a mukereti b'din hamalchus. So we know that the government recognizes a will as being a legal instrument of transaction, v'imkein lesba mishum gezel. And therefore, when the daughter inherits half the estate, in the illustration that we gave yesterday, you could say, well, dina de malchus dina, okay? Omnam nira she'ein ze ole yafeh. He says, but that's not going to work out so nicely. Lifi masha kasav harashba b'tshuva v'hu b'beis Yosef sham b'sof simin chavav. The Rashba writes explicitly in response to that, "De benogeya ledina Yerusha lo mahani ha de dina de malchus dina." He says, regarding the laws of inheritance that are outlined by the Torah, dina de malchus dina cannot be applied. Lifgoa b'seder nachalos hamavur b'Torah, to contravene the order of inheritance that's delineated by the Torah. V'chein pasuk hashach. And I refer you to the Shach, who supports the statement of the Rashba. So that's also going to be a problem. It says even if you wanted to rely on the principle of Dina de Malchus Dina, the Rashba, which is backed up by the Shach, says that Dina de Malchus Dina cannot contravene an explicit biblical protocol of how Yerusha works. So we know that there are limitations to the principles of Dina de Malchus Dina, right? And so v'lachein, and so therefore we're still stuck. V'lachein nira shahaderech hamitukan biyoter. In other words, what Rav Cohen is essentially telling us, are there instruments and legal arguments that you can rely on to uphold a will according to halacha? Yes. However, there are counter arguments to each argument that can be made to uphold a secular will. V'lachein nira shahaderech hamitukan biyoter bazehu al derech shtar chatzi zachar shenahagu ba b'nei amenu kvar mikadmas dina. So he says, and therefore the proper way to do this is to do a shtar which is known as chatzi zachar, half a male. Chatzi zachar, that's literally what it means, half the male. Okay, and this is something that had been done for many generations. Okay, shebe'ez shahabas nischatna hayakosev la aviha shetital chatzi chelek banav. He says when hazacharim be'izavono v'hayazela ke'in nedunya. He says the custom in Europe was that when a girl would get married, her father would write for her a contract promising her half of whatever her brothers would receive in the will, which I guess back in the day was a big concession. Today she would cry bloody murder if you tried that. But back in the day when the tradition was that girls got nothing, to say that you get half of what your brothers get was a big thing. And the father would do that for his daughter. And it was considered like an adunya. It was considered like a dowry. That as part of the wedding gifts, I promise you that when I die, you will get half of whatever each of your brothers gets. Shagam al hashtar hahu yesh lahayer. Deheich yaknela nechasav la'achar moto. And of course, the question is, how does that work? How can a testator make a transaction on his assets after he dies? Once I die, the money's no longer mine. The estate no longer belongs to me. So how could that possibly work? So this is a question that has been dealt with over the generations. This is not a new question. Ubir harama bazeh b'choshen mishpat b'simin reish pei aleph siv zayin shekosev lo shtar chov al atzmo le'ezesach gadol. And the Ramah writes that the solution is very straightforward. You basically write a promissory note to your daughter for an exceedingly large sum of money. And umatneh she'im yitnu la banav chatzi chelek zachar me'izavono yiftor min hachov hanal ad kan tochen devar. And the Ramah writes very simply, you basically make a conditional statement. You say, this, I owe you $100 million. That's what you write in the shtar. You write to your daughter, I owe you $100 million. However, it's a conditional promissory note. If upon my death, my sons give you half of what each of their portions are in the estate, then this promissory note is null and void. Such that basically you're placing a lien on your estate for an amount that far exceeds the value of your estate, which would mean that if the brothers don't give the sister half her portion, whatever that portion is, half of what each one of the sons gets, then she would get the entire estate. So
because you don't have that money. You never will have that money. So it's not realistic. And you pay that $100 million, you never have it. You never will.
Well, yeah, but you're basically saying I owe you. It could be a crazy number, like you said, but when a person is owed that kind of money, they basically have a lien for all of the real assets of that person's estate. They have a lien on everything, even if it's not the full value. If I tell you that I owe you a crazy amount of money, that's still a legally binding document. But you can only collect what I possess, and that's the way it works. So it's a legally binding statement. You're not offering it. You're indebting yourself to a certain amount. You're indebting yourself. You're basically saying, I'm committed to pay you a certain amount of money, right? Now, will you ever be able to fulfill that? No, but you do that as an incentive. The incentive is that if my sons give you the portion that I want you to receive, then the promissory note is null and void, right? And if they don't give you the half portion that you're entitled to, then what will happen is that lien will be binding and you'll be the owner of the entire estate. So that's essentially the way you get around creating an heir that the Torah does not entitle that heir to a share. Ba'ofen shekiyum tzava'aso nasa l'tnai hamivatel et hahitchayvut shehitil al atzma. He says, so therefore, the fulfillment of the wish to give the daughter the half portion will nullify the lien on the property. And by the way, when you write the promissory note, it doesn't have a date when the debt is collectible, when the debt is due, but presumably it becomes due upon the guy's death, right? Uve'im hatzava lo titkayem chala hahitchayvut shehitel al atzmo v'chayavim hayorshim shelo lifroa hachov mehen achasim sheyarshu me'avihim. He says, and if the heirs don't fulfill the condition of giving the daughter the half amount, then the debt is binding, and therefore they, even though they've inherited the entire estate, will have to relinquish the estate to the creditor, who is the sister. V'nusach hasholim shel shtar chatzi zachar hu b'sefer nachal hashiva Simin Chaf Aleph. Now, the text of that shtar can be found in the Sefer Nachal HaShiva. Nachal HaShiva is sort of like a rabbi's guidebook for, and it was written over 100 years ago. It's a guidebook of different texts that a rabbi needs to have at his disposal.
It's this tiny euros, but yeah, nothing.
Right.
So whatever text is.
It has a ksuva. It has what's called a ksuva de irkasa. It has a whole bunch of different texts that a rabbi needs in order to deal with different life cycle events. Okay. Ubir Sham, the nos, I'm not sure what that abbreviation is. Shizman Piraon Hachov Usha Echa Samach Lemisasa. Oh, so you do write down the time of the maturity of the debt. You say the debt is 1 moment before I die. 1 moment before I die, the debt is due. Okay? Ayin Sham. Ume'ata hare kol adam yachol lasos kein lahatil hischayvu shel sikum gadol al atzmo. And therefore, a person could create a huge amount of money as what he owes. Uzman ha'piraon yehisha echa samach lemisasa. For his daughter, let's say, he'll place the date due as 1 moment before I die. Yatil tanai bihischayvu zushi mikaimu yarshav hamatanos haksuvas b'tzava aso az tispatil hayischayvu shelo. Right, with the proviso that if my heirs fulfill my wish that so and so receives such and such an amount, then the debt is hereby annulled. Ve'alkein al kol divrei hashtar shenichtov b'samov. So therefore, we will show you a proper nusach of that statement. We'll list it in the next chapter. Shehu al derech zeh shematel hischayvus al atzmo v'tola osa beheder kiyum atzava v'alidei shtar zeh yischalku nechzei adam la'achar moso kedash shel Torah. And that's really the way to get it done. That's how you accomplish circumventing the Torah's normal protocol as far as how to distribute your estate.
That was her obligation, kind of in the same sort of way, she had more leniency that how to deal with this, and that passes away.
Well, it's going to be the same thing. According to the Torah, she's not entitled to any of her husband's, she's not an heir. A wife is not an heir. Now, as we mentioned yesterday, in Talmudic times, a wife, as long as she did not remarry, could continue living off of the estate, but it wasn't her property. It was the property of the true heirs, which were the sons, which is a very uncomfortable position, right? No woman, no almana, no widow would want to be in that position. Well, not no one, but it's just, if a woman was given the option, would you rather inherit your husband's estate or have your children inherit it and you live off of whatever they give you? So, right, live off their kindness. I've heard of situations. I've never experienced one personally, right? That's right, especially if it's like a second marriage, right? And the children are from the first marriage. That could be really dicey, right? So yeah, for sure. Okay, so well, whenever you want to create the debt, you can create the debt. It doesn't have to be a dowry, right? The Ramah writes this was the minhag. The minhag was that you would write this. This would be a contract that you would award your daughter at the night of her wedding. It's like part of all the gifts that were brought into the wedding. It doesn't have to be, though. Right, right. If it's set up before she gets married, then it's certainly, well, if it's set up before, then theoretically, if you would put it in the ketubah, you would write it in the ketubah as what's called nichse, either nichse milug or nichse tzon barzel. In other words, you would itemize that this promissory note is exclusively the purview of the daughter, and the husband is not entitled to it. A man can make a gift to a married woman and write explicitly that it's only for the woman and not for her husband. Well, you can, as long as it's structured properly, you could preclude the husband from having any rights to that gift. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's called nichse tzon barzel. Yeah.
And that when effectively the promissory note matures before he was involved. Technically, the condition occurs after the maturity of the condition that she is after the brother.
That's right.
Occurs after the maturity of the promissory note.
That's right. So it's a retroactive kind of condition. So if once the note is mature, if my heirs fulfill my condition, then retroactively the debt is nullified, which works halachically. You can nullify something retroactive. Okay. Oh, you mean a financial prenup? It's basically the same thing. It's the same thing as a ksuva. That's what a ksuva is. A ksuva is a prenup. It's a financial prenup. It entitles her to certain things, and they used to itemize all the things that she's bringing into the marriage with her, and they would write it down as that. Let's say the girl comes from a very wealthy family, so they would say that she's Tiffany, right? The kala is coming into the marriage, right? With $100 million trust fund, right? And it's in her name. And while the couple is married, the husband halachically has a right to dip into Tiffany's trust fund, but he has to pay it back to her upon divorce or death. Yeah. What's that? Well, it depends. Nichse tzon barzel is not only that he gets the fruit, but he can actually dip into the principal, right? It depends how it's structured. Real estate usually is that he only gets the fruit of the property, which means he can build on the property, he can collect rent from, let's say Tiffany owns a building, right? Also, right? Her parents gave her a building. Yeah. Well, that's usually the name of a rich girl, isn't it? Yeah. All right. So, yeah. So she owns a building. The husband gets to collect the rent while they're married, but the property still is in her name. In a trust fund, like if it's liquid assets or chattel, so he gets to actually consume the items in that bundle, but he has to return it to her. It becomes like a debt that he owes her, right? Well, that's an interesting question. Would he, if he distresses the real asset, does he have to pay back for improvements? I don't know that he does. He would probably have to maintain it. Yeah. Well, I don't know that. No, I don't know that he has to maintain the same value. I'm not sure about that. I don't know. What? Yeah. Yeah. That's the difference. I just said nichse milug is liquid or chattel, liquid assets or chattel, like Tiffany's trust fund, or Tiffany brings in 1 million widgets into the marriage. She has a warehouse full of widgets, right? So the husband gets to consume all of that, but once it's recorded in the ketuvah, it's the value is of all of the things that are liquid or chattel that she brings into the estate the value is recorded, and so once the marriage terminates, that becomes now a debt that is owed by the husband to her. Okay, that's nichsei tzon barzel. That's what Doug said, ironclad, right? That's the word barzel, tzon, right? Nichsei milug is real estate that she brings into the marriage. So therefore he gets to live off of it. His name is never on title. So her name is always on title, but he gets to live off of the property and gets to draw income off of the property. Okay. Well, she gets the property back. Yeah. Right. And exactly. He doesn't have to pay back any of the income that he drew.
The other one he has to pay back.
That's right. Exactly. Well, the argument is that the reason why the rabbis structured it this way is that they want there to be shalom bayis, and the husband can say, well, I married Tiffany partially, not only because she's a nice girl, but I wanted to marry a nice, wealthy girl so I can stay in learning a few years longer. Yeah. So, okay. Amnam yesh lishol, af b'kosev shtar yischai v'zeh. He says, but we still have to present a question. He says, Dahatenach begever hakosev tzava o biisha v'hi penuya. He says this will all work out for a man who's writing a will, or a single woman who's writing a will. Avol biisha nesua hakosefes tzava mai ika lememar. But what do you do when a woman is married and she wants to write a will? Denira deisha nesua shemit chayevet be'ize chiyuv mamon umeta. Okay, he says when a woman wants her assets, when Tiffany passes away and she wants her assets to go to certain people, her children, it could be she's married to a second husband and she wants her children to inherit her. Let's say she dies before her second husband. Who inherits her? He does. The husband inherits her. The Arashta Baila, so the husband inherits all of her estate. Ein hanachasim sheyarash mishtabdim la'oto chiyuv mamon. He says no matter how she structured her indebtedness to her daughter, let's say, that will not stop the husband from inheriting. Dahakaimalan b'shulchan aruch Ezer Siman Tzadi Siftes, bless you. The isha shemachra minichse milug achar shenise sumesa b'chaye bala abala motzi hanachasim miyad halakuchos. He says the Shulchan Aruch says that if a married woman tries to sell property while she's married, even though her name is on the title, the husband can, and then she dies, the husband can demand that property from the buyer. The reason is because we consider the husband to be the prior buyer. In other words, I can't sell a property twice. If I sold it to Reuven, I can't sell it to Shimon. As soon as a woman gets married, the husband takes a possession of her property, even though her name is still on the title. But if she sells it and then she dies, the husband halachically can confiscate it from the buyer because he's considered to be the first buyer. The kaven shuhu nechshav kilokeach rishon gam hashibut shiti la nechaseh lo chayla. He says, and since he's like the first buyer, the prior buyer, then even if she puts a lien on her property, the husband will be able to remove the lien and say, the property, I am the prior lien holder. All right, we'll have to hold it here. So we're going to get now to that issue and how we deal with it. Okay, have a great day, everybody.